Next on my business. I did a kind of piece mocking Kyle and Krystal a couple weeks ago, and it was really just a they did this like quick video in their car after Cornel West announced his presidential run, and it was just ridiculous. It was like them on the way to a racquetball game or to play tennis, going like, "Hey guys, here's why you shouldn't vote for Cornel West because, the People's Party is molesters and he's like a boomer who didn't look it up." And it just seemed very stupid and unserious. So I made this voiceover, which I covered on the last show, which I thought was pretty funny, and a bunch of people shared it. And Kyle was someone who kind of came out of the Bernie campaign, who I think gained a lot of viewers. I mean, I watched him largely because of that, because he was a Bernie guy criticizing the Democrats from the left. Oh my, how things have changed. It's become very obvious that Kyle and Krystal are kind of in the same pool as the other indie media people who take money from the DNC. So Cenk Uygur and Young Turks are a good example. They went face first into the Russiagate thing, face first into the COVID thing. No question, no journalistic integrity, no curiosity. Just reciting the same partisan lines that you'll hear on MSNBC or at a DNC campaign function. I think what the Democrats have gotten good at, and this is interesting because when I started being a Democrat, I hoped that they would get to this point. I always said, man, and Bill Maher is another person who said this quite a bit. I wish that the Democrats were as organized as the Republicans. That's what I used to say back in the day, because the Republicans would have their talking points and their team game plan, and they all, lock, stock, and barrel followed it. No one dissented from that. And now the Democrats have that because all the neocons have kind of moved into their party. And so you can just tell when someone is being disingenuous in indie media, and people like Kyle and TYT and the quote unquote leftist mafia, they all sound like they're vying for jobs at MSNBC. They're saying the exact same things you would hear if you tuned into MSNBC. So recently, these guys, Do Dissidents and RBN, had kind of joined up into this. They've been doing these post-duopoly shows. And if you've been watching any of my stuff, I started calling myself post-partisan. Post-duopoly, same thing. We're on the same page, just a different choice of words. But I love what these guys are doing. And I wanted to highlight this piece because after I watched this, I went on Twitter and I said, RBN and Do Dissidents are in Hardlens Media, who I've also started following thanks to Jimmy Dore, are doing the show that the leftist mafia wished they were doing. The leftist mafia wishes they were doing this. And they're just reciting DNC talk. And a couple of trolls came at me like, touting their audiences like, hey, well, they have a way bigger following. Matt Binder has so many people or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. And if you rate how good something is by how many people consume it, then McDonald's is the best restaurant in the world, right? Like over 10 billion served or whatever their sign says. So that means McDonald's is the best restaurant because the most people eat it, right? Like that's a ridiculous premise to begin with. So anyway, these guys, the post-duopoly left guys, who I'm a fan of and who I pay attention to, they did this kind of takedown recently of Kyle talking about Cornel West. And I want to show it to you. And I have my own commentary to add. Okay, watch.
I used to always make the argument, hey, man, the more progressives, the merrier, right? Because, believe in democracy, of course, as a matter of principle. So the more good options, the better. But as I've gotten older, the math side of my brain has been...
So I noticed this, and these guys talked about it after the fact too. But this is the line that the DNC talking point writers will hand out to their people. You know, when I was young and dumb, I used to think you could vote for who you wanted to. But now that I'm more mature and I can count, I know that you either have to vote for Democrats or Republicans. And when that's your only choice, it's pretty obvious what the choice is. I don't even think that's true anymore, but that's exactly, as soon as I saw him say, when I grew up and became an adult, I stopped thinking that third parties were a good idea. Those silly kids and their third parties. Jesus fuck.
More aggressive, where it's like, well, hold on, but that doesn't make sense. If you want to win, you need to be unified behind a candidate. And so Marianne Williamson got into the race first. She's got politics that are very similar to mine. I have 90%, maybe 95% agreement with her. So ideally, I wish there's one progressive up against Biden, and then progressives can unify behind that progressive to give us the best chance of winning, right? But if it wasn't Marianne Williamson running against Biden, well, then it would have been best case scenario, not only for Cornel West, but for the movement. If he had gotten in first, and then it was him against Biden of winning, right? But if it wasn't Marianne Williamson running against Biden, well, then it would have been best case scenario, not only for Cornel West, but for the movement. If he had gotten in first, and then it was him against Biden in a Democratic primary. Why do I say that? Because that's where he'd be able to make the most noise. That's where he'd be able to get taken the most seriously. That's where his numbers would be the highest. That's where the message would spread furthest and widest. That's where all the party infrastructure is. That's the way Americans are accustomed to voting in a two-party system when we don't have ranked choice voting and we have first past the post voting.
That's how you get trapped in a party that is going to smash you regardless.
They say all the time, oh, yeah, maybe we'll vote for an independent this time. It's always either the Democrat or the Republican, right? So for him to make the most noise and be the most relevant and get the furthest and change things the most, I think he would have had to run as a Democrat. I think he would have had to be the first one in, right? It's not the case. It's not the direction he went. So now we have a great option, Marianne Williamson, in the primary. That's great. And then, like I said, if you get to the general election and you're in a swing state and you want to do a protest vote, well, at least now you have what will likely be a Green Party candidate who's a solid candidate and is for many of the right things. Like I said, I probably have 90 to 95% agreement with him as well, with his politics. So anyway, there's your breakdown of it. It's a positive thing that he adjusted course because this is certainly more serious. I use that term loosely because of my general issues with third-party stuff, but it's...
Okay, we're going to stop there. Okay, so I don't know how Kyle must think his subscribers are dipshits, because did you watch the last two election cycles? Did you see what happened to Bernie Sanders twice? The Democratic Party stomped Bernie Sanders twice, and that was before they had the presidency. Well, they had the presidency under Obama. They were going to hand it over to Hillary. And then she turned around and lost to Trump because people wanted something different. And so Kyle must think that his viewers are idiots who didn't watch the Democratic Party crush Bernie Sanders and, for two election cycles. So now what he's advocating is, we need to get behind a Democrat so they can get stomped and we can eventually tell you to vote for Biden. Because that's exactly what's going to happen, right? And with Cornel West, I will say this. It's a long shot outside of the major parties, and the chances are pretty good he's not going to win. But here's what he is going to do. He's going to be a person who has a lot of leverage with whoever does win. Because I guarantee you, if we unite behind someone like Cornel West, who has the fortitude to see this through, and I love Cornel West just because of who he is as a person and his track record and his history. It has nothing to do with his race, has nothing to do with me hating the Democrats, although that's part of why I'm not voting for Democrats. But Cornel West is just a great person, and someone who I saw this clip earlier from Tavis Smiley, and it said, "President is off brand for Cornel West." And you know what I say to that? Yes. And that's exactly what people want. People don't want on brand. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden's on brand for president. Oh my God, what a disaster. What a disaster. And the only way the Democrats could convince someone to vote for Joe Biden is to scare them that Trump is some gigantic 10-foot monster fascist. And I stole that from Jimmy, but he's right, from Jimmy Dore, because the reality is hindsight's always 20/20. And now we can look back at the Trump era and go, oh yeah, a lot of the claims about Trump were exaggerated insanely. He's not a good person. He's a little belligerent. He's a little inartful in how he speaks, but he's not a fascist threat to him. He passed the First Step Act. If you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's a criminal justice reform act that actually did something. Unlike Biden's marijuana pardons, he pardoned federal prisoners of marijuana possession, which is basically no one. Anyone who's in federal prison for marijuana it's for selling it or distributing it. They're not in there. You don't have a possession charge. There's no one in federal jail, federal prison with a marijuana possession charge. And that's what in the Obama era, the Democrats got good at. Like I was saying earlier, they got organized. They got all the PR, the Frank Luntzes into their party. They started listening to those types of consultants. And if you don't know who Frank Luntz is, he was the guy who wrote this book called Words That Work and convinced Republicans to change the names of bills so that to PR them. So to give you just the freshest example I have in my brain, they had a thing called the estate tax, which was a tax on dead rich people. The Republicans changed the name to the death tax. And of course, who wants to be taxed when they're dead? Who doesn't, it's like, I don't want to pay my dad's taxes when he dies. That's terrible. So it's that kind of thing that has infiltrated the Democratic Party. And so back to my point about, I kind of took a sidebar there talking about Tavis Smiley saying president isn't on brand for Cornel West or president. Good. That's what we want. So to kind of like circle back here to the point I was making about Cornel West potentially losing. If he loses, he wields a lot of power, because whether he siphons votes away from the Democrats or the Republicans, he can go to whoever wins and say, hey, look, if you want my coalition of people, the 2/3, the third of people, or the 30% I got of the vote, you need to do X, Y, Z. And that, my friends, is how we're going to affect change. You can't voting for the Democrats blindly like we've done the last two cycles. I mean, I did it in 2016. I didn't know much about Trump. I voted for Hillary because I thought, yeah, what the hell? I mean, they're going to win, and it won't be that. It'll be inspiring for women to have a girl president, but I'm glad Hillary didn't win when I look at things now and what her State Department is doing under Biden. The people who were like, they would have had the Ukraine war 4 years ago if Trump hadn't got in. And there's articles when Trump talked to Kim Jong-un about defense stocks dropping. It's that kind of thing that it's like, whatever else you think about Trump, he's enough of a threat to those kinds of people that it makes him more likable. What they're doing to him in the courts right now is insane. It just makes me like him more. It's terrible. And it makes me wonder if they're just doing this because the TV networks want him back because he's big money. People tune in. It's every day is a tragedy when Trump is president. The news cycle is constant fear mongering. I don't know if you remember that, but from the day Trump started running, he was on TV every day. And I was like, is he doing this? Is it him that's the mastermind that's controlling the news cycle, or is it the press that can't get enough of him? So anyway, The point I'm making is a vote for a third party, unlike Kyle's dumbass said, is a good thing, because if the Democrats lose, that's good. They're going to have to lose. I want them to lose, because if they lose, then they can go, oh shit, like we need to do something to get these people's support back. What are we doing? But if they keep winning because you're scared of Trump, they're not going to change. And you know who knows that better than anybody? You know who knows that better than anyone, folks? Your boy, Lawrence motherfucking O'Donnell. Listen to what Lawrence has to tell you here, kids.
If you want to pull the party, the major party that is closest to the way you're thinking, to what you're thinking, you must show them that you're capable of not voting for them.
Because the way the Democratic Party is run now for quite a number
Lawrence
of
said it.
presidential cycles is they pick a nominee in a kind of half-assed process that doesn't really represent much of anybody, and then they tell everybody to just shut up. Don't bring up anything that will complicate life for your nominee. You know he's not for you on this. Why badger him? He's not going to be for you for reasons that you don't understand but are good reasons. Shut up. Turn off your brains.
If you don't show them you're capable of not voting for them, they don't have to listen to you. I promise you that. I worked within the Democratic Party. I didn't listen or have to listen to anything on the left while I was working in the Democratic Party, because the left had nowhere to go.
So Lawrence just told you right there, if you want to pull the party closer to what you want, you must show them you will not vote for them. And I love watching Kyle out here doing DNC PR. Well, you know, I used to be just a youngin' and I didn't know math and stuff, and that's why I wouldn't vote third party. But now that I'm an adult who can do math, I'm voting for Joe Biden. No, he's not going to tell you right now that he's voting for Joe Biden. That's not the game. His channel depends on the woman who officiated his wedding, Marianne Williamson. They're trying to do the same thing they did with Bernie, with her. You know, like, oh, hook their wagon to someone who's campaigning and raising money. And, you know, even with RFK, I ain't donating money to RFK. Look at that. Like, he's to the right of Gene Simmons, who's who's definitely not on the left. Gene Simmons is not on the left. So this thread I'm going to share with you right now. So this is the last point I was going to make about Kyle and Krystal. These people have audiences that are huge. And this is one of the things I got into with the guy about the leftist mafia, when he's like, oh, they have huge audiences and that's why they're better than Do Dissidents and RBN and all these cats. I said, well, I'm willing to bet that like 40 to 50% of their audience is probably Sally Albright's bots, right? And so let me just educate you as to who Sally Albright is, right? So this thread is from September 30th of 2019. And at this point in the campaign, the Joe Biden team had hired Sally Albright to attack Elizabeth Warren. So check this out. So thread on who Sally Albright is. Sally Albright, Madeleine Albright's daughter, the one who said we had to kill Iraqi children to get our goals. I don't even need to get into that, but she's a Kissingerite. So thread on Sally Albright. Sally is a former Republican operative known for her underhanded racist tactics. She operates a bot network using pics of deceased women, as HuffPo reported, and now she seems to have been employed to go after Elizabeth Warren. So here's Sally Albright, actually, without exaggeration, is a person repulsive enough to use a bot network that uses pictures of dead women to ensure the accounts aren't reported by those whose pictures are being used. Oh man. Sally Albright's profession is to smear political opponents and corporations, whether it's Wall Street Dem donors or the Trump team. So this is one where she was helping MAGA back in the day, but this is here it is right here. The excuse Sally used for going after Warren is that Warren said something negative about Hunter Biden. So there you go. There's an entire Huffington Post article about this where they kind of talk about, they go into a lot more detail. And it was actually a Bernie campaign person who discovered Sally's bot network. And then they did the journalism and investigated, and kind of like this guy mentioned the HuffPo article in his tweet. But I'm willing to bet you that people like Kyle and Krystal and the leftist mafia, you know, Humanist Beard and David Dull and all those guys, Stan Cedar, TYT takes money from Clinton donors. So I guarantee you that they use Sally Albright to puff up their audiences. You know, I'm sure her account of bots follows all of them and, you know, talks crap to people like Do Dissidents and RBN and calls them names. A lot of projecting, I'm sure, a lot of accusations of racism. You know, when you're a Republican, the one thing the Republicans were always good at was projecting, you know, basically accusing their opponents of doing the things they're doing. And now that's what the Democrats do, since all those consultants. See, the way that permanent Washington works is none of these people care. None of these people have any principles or political ideals. They're in this for the money. Steve Schmidt, who's on MSNBC now, Nicole Wallace, who's on MSNBC now, Bill Krystal, who's on MSNBC now, David Frum, who's a Democrat now. All of these people were the most insane right-wing neocons 10, 15 years ago when George Bush was president. And now suddenly they're Democrats. Imagine that. So because that's where the money is. Who's been controlling, you know, the country? And that's why Trump was such a huge aberration, because all these people had kind of quietly moved into Hillary Clinton's State Department under Obama. You know, the Victoria Newlands, what's that guy's name? Jake Sullivan's, the Antony Blinken's, you know, the Kagans, Victoria Nuland, all these people, you know, they're all Democrats now. And because of the grift, because Liz Cheney, you know, Robert Reich wrote a thing about how awesome Liz Cheney is because she joined with the Democrats for their January 6th theatrics, probably because Halliburton gets contracts to help find right-wing terrorists or something. Who knows? It's obviously corrupt garbage. But anyway, I digress. You know, the whole thing is a gigantic joke, and Kyle and Krystal and TYT and Sam Cedar and all these grifting ass mofos who just recite Democratic Party talking points might as well put in applications at MSNBC, because it's obvious they're vying for positions there anyway. You know, it's saddening. And then they wonder why people like Jimmy Dore have massive audiences. People like Do Dissidents have quickly growing audiences, because people want real news and honesty. So anyway,